to this week's edition of the Cream of Cabarrus Rankings. I'm Mark Plemmons, and I'm with Sports Editor of the Independent Tribune C, Jemal Horton, and we've got a good set of rankings for you this week, girls and boys basketball, and just we got a few changes after a good week of basketball since last week's rankings.
Yeah, week 4, Mark. Going to be a little bit of entertainment value here, and not just because it's not so hot, cold in here, but I still have this on because my shirt underneath is wrinkled. A little too much information, but I just want to know why you look like you're in Hawaii and I look like I'm headed.
I'm bluffing the weather. This is called in the mountain lingo bluffing the weather. 25 degrees out this morning when I walked out, but I did have the exact same jacket you had on this morning. So, well, as we get to the girls' rankings, let's start with Cox Mill at number 6. They're holding steady at number 6. The wins aren't stacking up for the Lady Chargers, but they're consistently playing with some of the better teams in the league.
Yeah, one of those teams, you know, you and I were talking before we decided to film this, and just really talked about how they took, you know, 2 of the top teams in our Cream of Cabarrus rankings to the limit over the past week or so. You know, playing really well against Hickory Ridge and J.M. Robinson. So there's progress in that. You know, each week, even though the wins are not necessarily mounting up, you're seeing that steady improvement, and eventually it's going to happen.
And it's one of those teams that you don't want to have to play.
That's exactly right. But you can no longer take it for granted.
First Assembly moves into the number 5 spot on the ladies' side of the rankings, and they've climbed up to number 2 in their conference rankings.
Yeah, they really did. They had a tough loss against Northside Christian, but part of that, and you and I alluded to it last week, you know, we didn't necessarily have all the numbers confirmed, but their star player, Zaria Wright, a sophomore, had 46 points in a game last week, you know, including 30 points at halftime.
Well, as we look at number 4 in the ladies' rankings this week in the Cream of Cabarrus rankings, A.L.Brown slipping one notch, not so much as A.L.Brown's play has slipped any. Team ahead of him got just a little bit better, and A.L.Brown and the Lady Wonders still very competitive, had a 1-point loss to one of the top teams in the state last week, and that's still a very, very, very good team at number 4.
It really is, but that's also, you know, you alluded to the team that is just a step ahead of them. That's also what these rankings are about. It's kind of acknowledging the successes that teams have throughout the season, and so we're certainly not taking anything away from the Wonders because they're playing well. They just happen to be hitting a really tough spot in one of the toughest conferences, toughest 4A conferences in the state. So there's no shame in that. And, you know, as we mentioned many times, we feel like that they will be there factoring into things at the end, not just in the Cream of Cabarrus rankings, but also in that Mecca 4A conference.
And as we look at number 3 ranking this week, an improving Central Cabarrus team moves up to number 3.
It's just, you know, every time they take the court, Mark, it's as if something new just jumps out at you. And, you know, we're filming this the night after, you know, we mentioned many times Sophia McFarland for the Vikings. Well, she recently had 25 rebounds in a game. There are some people that go, you know, a season without grabbing 25 rebounds. So, you know, if it's not McFarland, it's, of course, Mahaley Hollett, Casey Rowden, just so many different young women stepping up.
Justice Wallace, I think,
absolutely.
is in there. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So it's a very, very talented basketball team at number 3 in Central Cabarrus. So we move to number 2, Hickory Ridge. They're in a real dogfight, had a tough loss earlier this week to East Rowan. They're now in a 3-way tie for the South Piedmont Conference lead.
It's going to be a battle. It really is. It's going to be a Michael Jackson, as I like to call it.
Thriller.
A thriller.
Thriller.
It really is. But I think Talonda Simmons, the coach of the Raging Bulls, is going to have her team ready. You know, they know what's ahead. They knew this wasn't going to be easy.
No.
You know, it's not. And so, but good for them, you know, taking those steps. Stacia Means, Laura McMenamin, and of course Gabby Smith, the freshman phenom, is just doing a number of great things for that squad.
And we go to the number 1 team this week, J.M. Robinson.
I mean, you know, that's 4th consecutive week, and this is week 4 of the rankings. They're the only team in both the boys and girls rankings that has not moved. in terms of from that #1 spot. So kudos to Coach Lynn Smithson's squad. They had another big win this week over Huff High School. They had to battle a little bit in overtime, but they got it done. So, you give them credit for that. Even though that was a game that many people felt that they were going to just come in and walk over the Huskies, but the Huskies didn't bow down. But also, the Bulldogs certainly did not let off the gas once they knew that they were in that fight.
And Robinson now one game out in the Mecca 4A standings after Hopewell falls in an upset to Mallard Creek earlier this week. And now it's time to look at the Cream of Cabarrus rankings for the boys' side of things. As we go to number 6, we've got a new number 6. A.L.Brown, the Wonders, cracked the top 6 for the first time.
How about that? The Wonders are actually the very first new squad to enter the rankings, again, on either the boys or girls side. So, definitely give Coach Shelvin Klutz's team a lot of credit for that. It's been a little rough this year because they're young, inexperienced, and still trying to get to know each other. They only had 4 players with varsity experience returning this season. But you're starting to see signs of that progress. So you never know where they'll end up this year. Right now they're in the middle of the pack of the Mecca 4A.
They got some good basketball players, and of course they've been playing with some good, very, very good teams. As we go to number 5, First Assembly, Eagles stubbed their toe just a little bit earlier this week, and we have them at number 5 again this week.
Yeah, lost to Gaston Day. That was a little bit of a surprise.
I believe that was at Gaston Day.
It was, and from what I understand, it was a pretty good crowd. A lot of people, anticipating the Eagles coming in there, and this is what they, have to prepare to face each week now, being such a highly touted team. Ranked highly in the state, and certainly, they've been in the Cream of Cabarrus rankings all season long.
As we move up to number 4, holding steady, 2 wins since we last did the rankings, Concord Spiders. And they're a very steady team, had a solid defensive effort earlier this week against Central Cabarrus. I think they held the Vikings to 48 points. And with some of their offensive weapons, being able to hold some teams down like that, that makes them a very dangerous basketball team.
They're finding their way, Mark. They really are. I mean, you turn around and now they're third. They're in third place in the SPC in the South Piedmont Conference. So, and
that's one game back in third place.
Absolutely. They have a young center, Malik Ford, who's playing really well for them. Of course, everyone knows about Ray Kowalski, who can score the ball with anyone in this region. And then just that point guard, the freshman point guard, Rashawn Black.
He's the real deal.
Yeah,
he's
so
the real deal.
Third place. I wouldn't necessarily figure that's where they're going to stay. They're going to make things interesting for the top 2 teams in that conference.
And that's number 4 this week in our Cream of Cabarrus rankings. Hickory Ridge dropping to number 3 this week, or I think they're actually staying steady at number 3. We had them at 3 last week. They're tied for first place in the South Piedmont Conference, and a very good team led by Jalen Stowe, Avery Metcalf, and a lot of other talented pieces to that team. Yeah,
and they've gotten a couple of good wins. One of the things that certainly has helped make them stronger is the return of Bobby Babson, who is their center, who jumps out of the gym. Great, he's our leading shot blocker in the area. I think he's averaging over 3.5 blocks a game. So that's only making them stronger as the season goes on.
He didn't play in their last game against Cox Mill, so that was a factor.
Exactly, absolutely. But I think he's been back a couple of games now and has made an impact. The last game, I think he had 16 points for the Chargers. I'm sorry, for the Golden Bulls. No offense.
Raging Bulls. Golden Bulls they're over there. Johnson C. Smith.
Where am I going? Yeah. And then
the Raging Bulls.
That's the Lions.
The Lions. I called Statesville one time on the radio about half a basketball game, called them the Lions the entire time. Somebody called the radio station and said, "Hey, that's the Greyhounds, man."
Well, I know I'm new to the area, but I'm about to get punched out from fans from Hickory Ridge and
Raging Bulls. Raging Bulls.
Messing that up, so please forgive me.
And we'll go to the Bulldogs of J.M. Robinson, number 2 this week in the boys' Cream of Cabarrus rankings.
Yeah, they dropped 1 spot. They had been at that number 1 spot for a couple of weeks, and but they endured 2 tough losses. One against West Charlotte, although they played that game without their top performer, LeVar Batts Jr., who was battling an ankle injury. And then on Tuesday night, they had a really tough loss to Huff High School, which has North Carolina recruit Luke May on its squad. So, talking to Coach LeVar Batts after the game, he really said this team has a lot of work to do, and maybe it started feeling itself a little bit because of the high rankings and, the big win they had over North Mecklenburg, which was #1 in the state at the time. So he's really going to try to get them back down to earth, if you will. So it'll be interesting to see where they go after these two tough losses.
Yeah, the size for the Huff team the other night with May at 6'8", and I think they had another player at 6'5", 6'6" range, seemed to bother the Bulldogs just a little bit inside. But still, close basketball game. It was a 5-point ball game in the last minute of that ball game.
Yeah, so JMR fell down to the 4th spot in that Mecca 4A, so they know they have some work ahead of them.
And that is a tie, still just a couple games out of the top spot.
Right.
So, we got a new #1 team this week for the Cream of Cabarrus rankings. #1, Cox Mill.
Cox Mill. I mean, and we had alluded earlier to the fact that we had some teams tied at the top of the South Piedmont Conference, and that's Cox Mill being tied with Hickory Ridge. So I know there's probably some Raging Bulls fans who feel like, hey, why aren't we there? And we totally get that perspective. But still, a lot of season left to play. It'll be interesting to see how things wind up playing out in that conference race ultimately. But as far as the Chargers, Matt Morgan leading the way with, his other 2 cohorts in that backcourt, Messiah Baptiste and TJ Jones, they make it really, really tough for opponents. I think I alluded to them as havoc wreakers. And it makes such a difference when you have those guys out top and they get on that floor and they run. So, Coach Jody Barbie's squad is really, really, really looking good right now. Let's see how they handle being the #1 team in the Cream of Cabarrus.
I think one factor with Cox Mill too, they're probably just a little more seasoned than Robinson or Hickory Ridge.
Yeah, and they certainly have some obstacles. They're not a very tall team at all. But they've managed to find ways to overcome it, which is really one of the most impressive things about them. They have a 6'3" center, if you will, in Jonathan Earl, and he does a tremendous job of getting in there, battling, and making some things happening.
And I think TJ Jones plays. He plays at a 6'5" level.
He does.
So he's all the way around. He's around the rim. He's a loose ball guy. So that's the #1 team, Cox Mill. So. Boys side, Cox Mill. Ladies side, J.M. Robinson. Got some big basketball games coming up this weekend. Friday night matchups include Concord at Cox Mill, and on the boys side of things, that should be a real tussle. And then we got a Mecca Conference in-county game as J.M. Robinson goes to A.L.Brown, play up at Bullock Gym on Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun as usual. A lot of action. We'll certainly document that. In the Independent Tribune online and in the paper as well. And what about Radio Free Cabarrus?
Radio Free Cabarrus. We'll have 2 sets of games on Friday night. We will be at A.L.Brown and we will be at Cox Mill, so you can see both the boys and girls varsity games from both those sites on Friday night.
Yeah, so if you can't tune in during the game, if you can't be there on Radio Free Cabarrus, and then check us out online. And in the paper, in print.
And what we hope you do is go to the games, and then you can watch the video replay of our broadcast and read our game stories and see if you agree with our take on things.
Yeah, that's what I like to do. I say, who's more accurate?
Support your local team.
That's right.
It's important to support your local teams, and we're big believers in that.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
James Nix behind the camera today doing a great job again. We appreciate that.
James.
Even when it appeared that we might have a leaking roof right behind his head, you'll have to ask him about that. Doing a great job again, James. We appreciate all your hard work. This has been the Cream of Cabarrus rankings for this week. Hey, have a great afternoon or evening, everybody.